Published in 1726, Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift is one of the most famous works in English literature, often mistaken for a children's adventure story. The novel is in fact a sharp political satire that critiques human nature, government, science, and society itself. Through the fictional travel memoirs of Lemuel Gulliver, Swift exposes the absurdities, corruption, and moral weaknesses of humanity. Beneath its imaginative voyages and strange lands, Gulliver's Travels delivers a dark and often unsettling commentary on the flaws of civilization. The story is presented as a first-person account by Lemuel Gulliver, a trained surgeon and later a ship's captain. Gulliver is practical, curious, and observant, but also naive. His personality makes him the perfect vehicle for satire. He describes extraordinary events with calm rationality, often failing to recognize the deeper implications of what he witnesses. Gulliver's journeys take him to 4 different lands, each designed to reflect and exaggerate aspects of human society. With each voyage, his view of humanity becomes more critical and disillusioned. Gulliver's first voyage takes him to Lilliput, a land inhabited by people no taller than 6 inches. After a shipwreck, Gulliver awakens to find himself tied down by thousands of tiny ropes. Despite their size, the Lilliputians are aggressive, suspicious, and obsessed with power. Eventually, Gulliver earns their trust and becomes a valuable asset to the state. He helps defend Lilliput against its rival empire, Blefuscu, whose citizens are also tiny. The war between the two nations stems from a ridiculous disagreement over how to crack open an egg, at the large end or the small end. Through this absurd conflict, Swift satirizes the trivial causes of political and religious wars in Europe. The Lilliputian court is filled with corruption, vanity, and cruelty. Officials gain power not through wisdom or merit, but through their ability to perform ridiculous rope-dancing tricks for the emperor. Despite his service, Gulliver eventually falls out of favor after being accused of treason for refusing to destroy Blefuscu completely. Disillusioned by the pettiness and ingratitude of the Lilliputians, Gulliver escapes and returns to England. Key satire: petty politics, abuse of power, religious conflict, corruption in leadership. In his second voyage, Gulliver is shipwrecked in Brobdingnag, a land of giants. Here, Gulliver becomes the miniature curiosity. A farmer captures him and displays him for profit before selling him to the queen. Unlike the Lilliputians, the Brobdingnagians are generally kind, simple, and morally grounded. However, Gulliver's tiny size forces him to confront the fragility and ugliness of the human body. Everyday objects become dangerous, and insects appear monstrous. Gulliver proudly describes English politics, warfare, and science to the Brobdingnagian king, expecting admiration. Instead, the king is horrified by Europe's violence, corruption, and misuse of reason. He concludes that Gulliver's people are the most pernicious race of little odious vermin that nature ever suffered to crawl upon the surface of the earth. This voyage reverses the power dynamic of the first. Swift uses scale to emphasize moral perspective, suggesting that greatness is not measured by size, but by virtue. Key satire: human pride, militarism, scientific arrogance, moral hypocrisy. The third voyage is more fragmented and abstract. Gulliver visits Laputa, a floating island inhabited by scientists and intellectuals obsessed with theoretical knowledge. These people are so absorbed in abstract thought that they require servants to remind them to listen or speak. Below Laputa lies Balnibarbi, a land suffering from disastrous experiments conducted by impractical scientists. Crops fail, buildings collapse, and the economy deteriorates because of misguided attempts to apply science without common sense. Swift mocks blind faith in reason, scientific elitism, and progress disconnected from human needs. He warns that intellect without wisdom can be just as dangerous as ignorance. Gulliver later visits Lugnag, where he meets the Stroldbrugs, immortals who continue aging without dying. Far from being blessed, they live in misery, disease, and despair. Immortality, Swift suggests, is a curse rather than a gift. Key satire: misuse of science. Intellectual arrogance. The illusion of progress. Fear of aging and death. The final and darkest voyage takes Gulliver to the land of the Houyhnhnms, intelligent horses who live according to reason, logic, and harmony. They are calm, rational, and free from lies, greed, and violence. In contrast, the land is also inhabited by yahoos, filthy, irrational, and savage humanoid creatures. Gulliver is horrified to realize that the yahoos resemble humans. As Gulliver lives among the Houyhnhnms, he becomes increasingly ashamed of humanity. He admires the horse's rational society and comes to despise his own species. Eventually, the Houyhnhnms decide Gulliver must leave, viewing him as too similar to the yahoos. This final voyage delivers Swift's harshest critique. Human beings, he suggests, pride themselves on reason, but are often ruled by greed, violence, and selfishness. Gulliver returns home unable to tolerate human company, preferring the presence of horses. Key satire: human arrogance, moral corruption. The limits of reason. Civilization versus nature. Gulliver's transformation. Across the 4 voyages, Gulliver undergoes a dramatic psychological change. He begins as a curious observer, mildly critical but hopeful. By the end, he is bitter, alienated, and disillusioned. Swift intentionally makes Gulliver an unreliable moral guide. His final rejection of humanity is extreme, suggesting that pure rationalism without empathy can be just as flawed as human vice. The novel leaves readers uncomfortable, forcing them to question where the balance between reason and emotion truly lies. Gulliver's Travels explores several enduring themes: human folly and pride, corruption of power, limits of reason, satire as moral critique, civilization versus nature. Swift uses exaggeration and irony to reveal uncomfortable truths. Laughter becomes a tool for moral reflection. Swift's prose is clear, controlled, and deceptively simple. The novel mimics the structure of travel journals popular in the 18th century, adding realism to its fantasy. Though often simplified in adaptations, Gulliver's Travels is a deeply pessimistic work. Its legacy lies in its fearless critique of humanity and its refusal to offer easy solutions. Gulliver's Travels is far more than an adventure story. It is a brilliant and unsettling satire that challenges readers to examine their own societies and themselves. Jonathan Swift exposes human pride, cruelty, and absurdity with sharp wit and moral urgency. 3 centuries later, the novel remains shockingly relevant. In a world still plagued by political pettiness, misuse of power, and blind faith in progress, Gulliver's Travels continues to hold up an unflattering mirror to humanity, one that invites laughter, discomfort, and reflection in equal measure. Thank you for watching. Your support helps this channel grow. Please like the video, subscribe, and comment your favorite book so I know what to summarize next.